Hey, see, this is Tom Plant. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, thanks. Welcome, everybody. My name is Tom Plant, Commissioner on the Colorado Commission, and I'm opening the second workshop for proceeding number 23M-0466EG. Appreciate all the comments that we've received, and it's really been a great help as we run through the issues that were identified in the order that created this M docket. So appreciate all the comments. We have 3 hours reserved for this morning's workshop. I don't think it'll take that long. My thinking around this is I'd like to just run through a little presentation where I can sort of show where we are in the process, and some of the comments that we got on the various different questions have sort of distilled down into different slides. I'd like to go through those, and if any of the folks on the workshop right now have any comments or things that you want to add to that, you could do the raise your hand feature, or just turn on your camera and we can get your comments on the record. I also want to point out that we will have an opportunity for submitting final comments by November 30th. So if you want to sort of address these things a little later as well, you can do that. And before I go through all those different components of the questions, I would like to just have an opportunity to talk with the folks from Excel and get a little bit better, not right now, Todd, in a minute, and get a little better understanding of sort of where they are in their process. So we'll do that. I'll run through a couple of slides. We'll have a little discussion with Excel, and then I'll run through the rest of the slides. And that's kind of what we have planned for this morning. I'll share with you also next steps. So Casey, if you could bring up the slides. So this is the decision in C-230413, maximize value of ratepayer-funded investments made in the utility infrastructure by engaging third parties in an RFP focus on these 3 pilots: virtual power plants, natural gas demand response, and neighborhood electrification. That's the purpose of this docket. If you go to the next slide, actually that's the topic of the docket. I think this is the purpose. Identify the core objectives and timelines, set the main technical costs and time parameters for the RFPs, establish milestones for the RFPs, and set operational reporting milestones for the pilots. If we can go to those were basically the questions that we shared prior to this workshop. One of the issues that came up in the first workshop was a preference for a market platform by many of the parties. But based on the comments we've received, while it might be a good structure ultimately for the rollout of a fully implemented DERMS and VPP effort, at this pilot phase, it's, I think, premature, and we probably need to have a much deeper discussion around the market platform once we have some of the information from the pilot programs and the DERMS platform. Next. The second issue that I wanted to bring up is neighborhood electrification. As I mentioned earlier, that was a part of the initial order, and so we examine neighborhood electrification and how that might be included in the RFPs from this proceeding, but I don't feel like we received enough comments and really substance to develop to instruct a fully realized program. As the company's noted in its comments, this is contemplated in a much fully litigated clean heat plan proceeding, and hopefully that will engender more participation from the parties, and we can get a little bit more information prior to the launch of the neighborhood electrification program through that proceeding. And I think one of the sort of downsides of that is that this will delay the neighborhood electrification proceeding substantially as a part of that litigated proceeding. But on the other hand, if we're focusing on these other RFPs in this proceeding, they maybe can inform some how VPPs can be integrated into that ultimate neighborhood electrification program in the future. So I think, and so we're going to drop that from this proceeding. Next, regarding the DERMS platform, various comments that we've received suggest that these are the various different components of a DERMS platform. It should be open architecture, have utility APIs, send clear signals in a transparent M&V platform, provide dynamic response for a variety of technologies that are enrolled from participating VPP aggregators. The comments that we received is that should be able to be deployed in time for a pilot rollout. In terms of whether or not the gas DR pilot is a part of that DERMS, I think is something that I want to leave to the company to determine, just because it may or may not be more beneficial to run that through the DERMS platform, since it is a specific application for gas DR. If it's possible, obviously, to have one unified platform, I think that would be preferable. But I understand if the different the gas application versus the electric system application may require different platforms. And one thought that I had, and one of the things that I've heard from some of the various different participants is, getting participation from VPP aggregators. I've heard from the participants here that there is an interest in operating in Colorado, and that VPP aggregators are interested in joining a program here. But there is also a concern that a short-term pilot may not attract a DERMS provider that can doesn't have a certainty of sort of scaling or going to a much bigger application, more long-term contract. And so I'm wondering if there could be, and this is something maybe the company can address at some point, the opportunity to establish a performance metric, so that once you've selected a DERMS provider through the RFP, if they meet certain performance metrics, then they would be the default platform for expansion, and that might attract DERMS providers to want to enter the market. That's just one of the concerns that I had that maybe we can discuss with the company. So with those observations, I'd like to take the opportunity at this time if I could, to talk to the company and maybe get a little bit of clarification on some of the different issues that they've raised and others have raised through this proceeding. And so we can get a little bit more clarity just on where things are there. So I'm sure if Zach and Tyler, yeah, there you are. Okay, great. Thanks for joining today, and thanks for your comments. I feel like I've certainly learned a great deal through this process, and so I feel like we're moving forward on the objectives of this program. But there's a few things that I was a little unclear about that I wanted to see if we could get clarification from you guys as it relates to the current program and the current plans from the company. One of the things that you mentioned, I think, in the latest comments and referred back to the phase 1 DSP was the DERMS roadmap, which I think that phase 1 DSP was maybe about a year ago, maybe almost exactly a year ago. I was wondering what the status is of the DERMS roadmap at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Plank. Good morning. Zach Pollock, Director of Grid Strategy and Emerging Technology for Excel. There are a couple of pieces to that. So, we think of DERMS as a set of systems and business processes. So there's not, one off-the-shelf technology platform that you can go buy. So the roadmap is really meant to encapsulate how all those things are coming together. What we did propose in our DSP, though, was a DRMS platform. There are a lot of vendors today that are calling themselves DERMS providers, but in our view, they're really more of a demand response management system provider. Regardless, the capabilities of a DRMS will give us the functionality, I think, to achieve many of the objectives that you're seeking to achieve in this docket. So where we are with that process right now, we are looking to put that out to RFP in Q1 of the next year. The reason for the delay there is that we've looked a bit more broadly across the variety of programs and devices that the company currently manages. We've got some legacy devices that we're looking to pull into a new, more modern system that will give us more functionality there. We also, as you know, from the DSP docket, we're currently using proprietary vendor platforms, 2 of them at the time, to manage the batteries that are part of the RBC program. So one of the things we're seeking to do, again, to achieve that same scale, which I think is the objective of this docket, is move the management of those batteries and additional vendors and OEMs into that DRMS platform. So that's really where we are in timing right now. Happy to answer any other questions there as well.
Yeah, so that's interesting. One of the things that you just mentioned was you think that some of the different companies that are calling themselves DERMS are more just not DER management, but more demand response management. And I'm wondering if you can help me understand sort of the distinguishing features between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. DRMS, as far as a demand response management system, it's a little bit of a misnomer. A lot of the companies that sell those types of solutions today actually do provide the ability to manage things beyond demand response. So they're capable of managing batteries, smart inverters, managed charging, et cetera. So it's no limitation in that regard. Really, and again, as you probably gathered, there's no industry-wide definition of what a DERMS is. Where I draw the line is most DRMS platforms today, that software is not typically integrated inside the utilities control room with operational technology systems like SCADA, an advanced distribution management system. That's part of our longer term vision, but we believe there's a lot of value that a DRMS platform can provide today without necessarily having that integration.
Okay, thanks. Let's see. In the settlement agreement, the company, I was wondering, one of the things that you talked about, and I'm wondering if you're prepared to share this at this time, is the proposed DERMS use cases, associated requirements, and the policy goals that the DERMS would be used to advance. I think that was the language that was in the settlement agreement. Are you at a place now where where you're prepared to share those. And I mean, if you don't need to run through them now, you could put it in your final comments, but are you guys at a place within the roadmap discussion where you're able to share those?
Yes, absolutely. So there's two primary use cases that were tied to the RBC project or program that was part of the RES plan. The first one was recognizing some of those operational efficiencies of being able to rather than separately manage batteries through proprietary vendor platforms, move the two existing vendors we have today that are part of that program into a single platform, as well as open up the program more broadly to other battery vendors. There are some limitations with that program because it is partially funded through the RESA. Those batteries through statute have to be charged 100% by renewable energy. So we are looking at a second use case that was part of the settlement agreement there to enable what we consider more of a pay-per-performance program. So that would actually be looking at using batteries and paying them based upon how they actually perform on a kW or kWh injection basis. We think there's a lot of value in not necessarily limiting it to only batteries that are charged 100% by renewable energy. From a use case perspective, I would say that both of those are initially looking at bulk system benefits. There's certainly an opportunity, I think, as we grow into the DRMS platform and ultimately our DERM strategy to look at leveraging those for more local constraints as we get better information or able to tie those to physical asset locations like transformers and meters and things like that.
Great. So one of the things that, as you mentioned, you've got some sort of technology specific programs. You've got your AC rewards, your heat savers, your battery connect programs, and then, well, we won't talk about it here. In the TEP, you talk about having EV managed charging. So these are all sort of technology specific efforts, and I'm wondering if the vision for your DERMS construct is to be able to pull these various different disparate technologies together under one sort of one system. Is that kind of the idea?
Absolutely. That's the aspiration there. So again, there's a lot we can do with the DRMS platform today. I think as we start to see scaling of those programs to the level that, I think the commission desires here, and we do too as a company, having a tie into some of the visibility of our actual real-time operational control systems is going to be necessary. But I think there's a lot we can do in this interim period over the next 1 to 2 years, just through that DRMS capability, bringing those disparate systems and technologies together, as well as modernizing some of our legacy systems.
Is that something you think we'd be able to test out within this pilot phase?
I think it's a possibility. I mean, we're in a little bit of an interesting situation where we have approval for the DRMS, but not necessarily cost recovery, and that's tied to those two specific use cases I walked through a minute ago. I certainly think there's value in making sure that we're maximizing the use of that investment. We've already begun to do that internally. So maybe that's something we can provide a little bit more color in our final comments.
That would be great. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, so there's a variety of compensation mechanisms, obviously, that can be considered within this kind of a system. COSA had mentioned in their comments it would be instructive to sort of be able to compare a couple of different types of compensation structures within the pilot to compare participation and performance levels. Is that something that you would agree with? And are I think that they referred to them as I'm trying to remember the language they use, required versus a required participation versus being able to opt out, basically. There's the upfront pay with a required participation, or the straight performance, or some kind of a combination of the two. Maybe is an opportunity. I mean, what do you see as potential effective performance structures there?
I think we may be heading there organically. I just say that based upon how the Renewable Battery Connect program is structured today. Most of that's an upfront incentive of about $500 per kW of battery capacity. And then we pay customers $100 per year, basically to stay enrolled in the program. I think there's a maximum opt-out of 2 events. In conversations and developing that second use case around the pay-per performance, I think there's good alignment between the company, COSA, and some other stakeholders that have been involved in that conversation on moving towards that per injection or per event actual performance, rather than just kind of a blunt upfront incentive with a more de minimis payment over time. So I think we may have something in the works already that will allow us to draw that type of comparison. I do think there is value in understanding the difference between event performance, enrollment, participation, et cetera, between those 2 types of structures.
Yeah, and maybe even a combination of the capacity and the energy benefit performance or something.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and we're sort of doing this in real time. As you probably know, that the company filed an extension on the DRMS use case report. I think that will be on the agenda this week, as we're still working through a lot of these issues with the stakeholders, but very much trying to make progress quickly here.
Okay, great. And do you currently have the capability? One of the things that we heard from a whole bunch of commenters was the necessity of the open access API process. Do you currently have the capability to share data through the API with DERMS or something, or is that something you would need to develop from scratch?
So that's definitely part of our architectural design and consideration. There's some pretty common standards used in the industry. Web-based services through APIs is certainly one way that we'd be able to interface with the DRMS platform and aggregators that would be providing assets or services to us. OpenADR is a little bit of an older technology, but commonly used by demand response providers. And then IEEE 2030.5 is another common standard that most of the industry uses today. So as long as we're not relying on proprietary vendor protocols, which honestly, I don't think anybody's doing that these days anymore, we'll have the ability to integrate resources using any one of those 3 different types of means of communication here.
And is there any kind of a technical constraint in the type of communications protocols you would use based on the smart meters that we have installed, or is the technology that we have sufficient to accompany any industry leading protocols?
It depends on the use case, and I'll probably have to get back with some more technical comments here. Generally, something that isn't nanoseconds or milliseconds of latency, that type of need, like distribution automation, that's really where you'd only run into a constraint with some of the bandwidth on the field area network that those meters use. And I believe, we are enabling, if we haven't done it already, home area network capability through the meter itself. So that's a possibility as well.
Okay. And has there been any agreement through the DERMS roadmap on specific open access communication platforms for the BP aggregator participation, or is that something that's still ongoing?
That's certainly factored in, again, through the architecture of what we think that's going to look like. So we have a general architectural concept of it being a system of systems. We see DRMS as being really the key and first system we want to get going with here. And implicit in that is an understanding that the DRMS would be capable of interacting with vendors, DER providers, and aggregators, provided they're using some of those standards that I walk through to be able to interface with us.
Okay. One of the other issues that was brought up by a number of different commenters was M&V processes using something like an open EE meter, open access M&V platform. Is that something that you've looked at, or do you have a certain perspective on that open EE meter type of M&V?
I can't say I've looked at that in particular. I think there's a lot of different ways that we can go about M&V here. So again, happy to provide a little bit more thoughtful response from the right subject matter experts in final comments.
Great. Yeah, I think one of the capabilities of that was to be able to baseline and compare against,
Sure.
uh, other groups, which would obviously be beneficial in a pilot program for determining effectiveness and quantifying some of these things. So yeah, if we could get more of the company's thoughts on that, that would be great.
Sure.
And finally, this is, one of I had a couple of things that just sort of came into thinking as I was, sort of reading through various different filings. And, we talk about DERMS as, managing demand, which, is kind of in the name. So that would make sense. But would a sort of mature DERMS program be capable of mitigating curtailment issues as well? And that is, basically being able to use, DERMS as a charging platform, basically, for utilizing any renewables that might be, subject to curtailment at a certain point, and then being able to pull that out later.
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible from a technical perspective, provided it's true sort of over generation and not, a transmission constraint causing that curtailment. The ability to shape load to meet what's available and soak up that excess generation, I think is certainly a possibility of a DERMS platform.
And do you have any thoughts about, I think about, sort of the greatest, benefit opportunity around batteries maybe is with existing solar customers. They tend to be sort of some of the early adopters and things like that. And I'm wondering if the company has contemplated sort of relative benefits of maybe increased incentives or outreach to existing solar customers for new battery deployments, and also locational value, as I think was brought up by a couple of the commenters on some of these various different DERs.
So I believe today we do offer, or customers are able to pursue a battery with that additional incentive from the Renewable Battery Connect program, regardless of whether it's a new installation or a retrofit of a battery to the solar rooftop. About 99% sure that's the case. So there is that incentive there. On the locational value, that's one of those things where, depending on the use case, honestly, there's certainly value there. But if we're looking at something like a non-wires alternative, we'll probably need a little bit more visibility in real time into how those systems are performing in relationship to other operational technology data we have. There is other types of value that can be provided at a locational basis. So in other words, if we have a constrained feeder where we're not necessarily looking at a capacity upgrade and don't have something budgeted like we would for an NWA, there's still maybe value of providing an enhanced incentive to help slow load growth in the area. So we might be able to push out the need for that project rather than outright defer it, which is really sort of the objective of the NWA, if that makes sense.
Yeah, is there an opportunity that the DERMS could address some of those issues, or at least in the pilot phase examine some of those issues, particularly where you maybe have an area where you have a lot of EV adoption or heat pumps or other sort of large loads that might together constrain the feeder. But if you're able to manage them through a DERMS, maybe you could, as you were pointing out, maybe defer some of that capacity.
Yeah, I certainly think that's possible. Again, it just depends on how complex you want to get with this, whether you're sort of managing it in real time or more of a day ahead basis. And that's actually pretty well aligned with the concept that we floated in a couple of different proceedings of having these targeted demand areas, parts of our system where we know that load, whether it be electric or gas, is increasing faster than the average rate of our various territories and geographies. but it's not quite at the point where it's necessitated the need to actually go budget a project for additional electric or gas infrastructure. So I think there is good alignment with that concept with what you're describing here.
Great. And, I brought this up in the sort of last bullet here under the DERMS platform. And this was another, thing that I was thinking about. And I don't know if you've had any thoughts about this, but one of the concerns that I had was, if we're doing a pilot and trying to attract a bunch of VPP aggregators to participate in the market, because it's a pilot, because it's a shorter term, maybe there might be well, not from the VPP aggregator side as much, but from a DERMS provider, if they don't see it as being a much longer term sort of a thing. Are there performance metrics or something that could be attached to an RFP for a DERMS provider that would give them a sort of a longer term opportunity for participation in the system if they meet certain performance metrics, or some way that could be built into the agreement?
I think what we've seen in the industry is a bring your device type offering through some of these DERMS providers. So, ideally we'd be contracting with the DRMS or the DERMS provider for a specific set of use cases and objectives for this pilot. But I think the end goal here is to be able to scale that platform so that we can move beyond just managing batteries, managing DR, et cetera. So, to me, as the utility, I think from the perspective of a vendor, that would be attractive to me. I may have an initial software license to start for part of this pilot, but if there's future opportunity to scale that to other programs, I think that would be attractive from a commercial perspective.
I would add there, if you don't mind, that
sure.
My understanding is that typically for our DSM type of pilots, we lay out in the RFP the potential to turn the pilot into a full program or a larger scale offering if there's cost-effective results of the pilot. But there's not, in my understanding, is there really has not been kind of a contractual right that you'll become, the vendor for the full program rollout from the pilot. And so that would be a little unique if we go down that route, is my understanding. And we'd also think about, is that fair for competition for all vendors in that kind of process or not? Not saying it's not a good idea, but just some feedback there as well.
Yeah, I was sort of, debating those two concerns as well. You basically move the competition up front, but maybe you get more providers participating because they see an opportunity for the longer term. And I think, Zach, maybe what you're saying is just sort of the promise of the opportunity might be enough to attract those companies at the beginning.
I think so. And one thing I wanted to clarify, maybe just my misunderstanding here, but when you're saying third-party DERMS providers, are you talking about folks that may be aggregating DERs and providing them to the utility, or are you talking about the actual technology platform itself?
Yeah, I'm talking about the technology platform. I'm assuming that the VPP aggregators are going to be participating in an open market, basically, that is provided through the DERMS platform. From the utility. So it would be more that platform, that's kind of the heart of the whole thing, right? And then you've got all the aggregators participating out here, and that's the kind of the component we want to make sure we get right. and I wonder if having how we can make sure we get the largest number of applicants into an RFP, if it's for a pilot with sort of the promise of a longer term contract.
Yeah, typically in my experience, the utilities have been the procurers of the platform that allows third parties and DR providers to provide their assets and their services to the utility. I think that fits pretty well with the bring your own device construct. There are a few programs in the Northeast, Massachusetts and Rhode Island called Connected Solutions, where the utility has the platform that allows vendors and DER providers to basically bid those services as part of a pay-for-performance program, but the utility itself sort of runs the platform with the tight constructs that have been established by the commission there and the technical requirements needed to do so. Those platform providers also typically work pretty closely with the vendors to make sure that they're able to bring their assets and integrate them into the solution. So they'll typically have SLAs with companies like Tesla and SolarEdge, et cetera, that we're using today. So I think that may be able to accomplish what we're talking about here, but I've just never seen really a third-party DERMS platform sort of outside the utility IT ecosystem.
So when you're looking at an RFP for DERMS, you're thinking something that the utility would basically purchase and then operate within the company, as opposed to having an agreement with a DERMS provider that you have basically API that goes to the DERMS provider and then is then communicated out through them to the PPP.
That's exactly correct. Yeah. So if we're talking about integrating DERs and other assets with that platform, we would likely be, or a vendor that we select would be exposing an API to the outside world, to those devices, for allowing for that integration, that communication between them, or it could be done through OpenADR or IEEE 2030.5.
And the objective is to have really an open VPP aggregator market, as opposed to sort of some of those that you mentioned are specifically with a Tesla or a specific company that has specific technologies.
That's correct. Yeah, I'm not sure I'd characterize it as a market, but I think setting the incentive structure and the pricing signals so that anyone with those devices or those assets and adhering to the open standards and open communication protocols is able to bring their asset and integrate it with that DRMS platform.
Right. Yeah, that's those were all the sort of clarifying questions that I had. I don't know if you have any other things that you want to share before we get to the individual questions and we kind of open it up for comments from the participants. But any other thoughts?
At some point in time, it might be helpful just to the company at least to just raise some more basic process questions of how this is intended to move forward at some point in time. And I'm not sure if now's a good time to raise those. And I'm not trying to put anyone on the stand to answer any questions, just raising some questions that we've been thinking about internally as well. So I'll defer whether you'd like to hear that now or later as well.
Well, yeah, no, let's do it now.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think from what we've heard a little bit here, there is potential that this RFP request may include a third-party DERMS platform as kind of a new addition. I think we've heard that a little bit this morning. So we'll probably be seeking clarity if that's a new intent or not. It is kind of one background question. And there might not be a final determination there yet. Just a question we're raising. Another kind of process question is just, more basically, the intent here is that at some point in this miscellaneous docket, there will be a final decision that will instruct the company, pardon me, to issue this RFP or sets of RFPs with all of the, and I'm curious, will the decision have instructions for what the RFP should include, or will there actually be like an attached RFP that we're asked to issue? And a bigger thing that I don't think we really had much comments on yet is where the costs of these pilots ultimately flow through. I think the company has had an assumption that the cost would flow through a future DSM plan filing, but we really haven't talked much about how that would work yet. So sorry for my voice, but that's just some process issues that we're thinking about internally here as well.
Yeah. So I can tell you sort of the way that I'm thinking about this, and I don't know if Ms. Dundas wants to chime in as well. But I do not anticipate us giving you an RFP that you would then, put out on the market. I think what the instructions from the order really were to give you components of an RFP through this proceeding that the commission wants to see as a component of any RFP that's going out for these services. The order is not specific around DERMS. It's more specific around third-party providers. And so I think that what we have learned through this proceeding is that a DERMS system has the greatest opportunity for scalability and to really do these the management of a variety of different technologies and much more expansive applications, as opposed to, as Mr. Pollack said, as opposed to just a DR for the bulk system, which is of course one of the objectives. But I think we see it as a much more integrated and complete system that would integrate numerous technologies. But that's the third parties is what this RFP is targeted towards. So I think that what a decision will ultimately contain are components of an RFP, but we're not going to write an RFP. I don't think I think that's probably in the best interest of anybody. So that, I don't know if that answers your question. We're targeting sort of a December timeframe for getting a recommendation to the commission.
That's helpful. And I would just add that there will be an upcoming company DSM plan filing for future years beyond 23. And so questions of cost recovery that I laid out there is maybe one that we'll continue to explore in different areas as well.
And I'm just curious, because I've asked a few people this and I haven't found out anything yet, but do you have a time frame for this? Is the plan coming off of the strategic issues? Yeah.
Yeah, it's forthcoming. I don't have an exact date, but it is expected soon.
Okay. By the end of the year?
Yes, that is the company's intent, but hopefully sooner than that.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the conversation. And at this point, what I'd like to do is just sort of run through some of the questions and some of the components that were in the last set of questions that we issued, and invite any of the participants on the workshop to either raise your hand or just turn on your camera to respond. And I'm going to go through a variety of different slides here that address different issues. If you have any comments regarding what we just heard from the company, that would be welcome as well. But if we go to the next slide, actually 2 slides, I think that's where we just were. So this is the core targets of the pilots was the first bullet, and I'll take gas demand response and the VPP separately. The gas demand response, this really I don't need to run through all of this list of things, but these were basically pulled from the comments as being core targets from the participants that you would like to see. I don't know if anybody has, and again, this is for the gas demand response. If there are any comments that anybody would like to make on this one. we'll go to VPP next. Give you a minute to just sort of read through the screen there. And the other thing I would say is you're also welcome to address the components of these slides in your final comments if you would like, and I'll talk about that again at the end of this workshop and what the timeframes are on that. All right, not seeing any hands. We'll go to the next slide. And this is the core targets of the virtual power plant pilot. So if you want to take a minute and sort of read through this, if anybody has any other comments associated with this, would welcome. Again, you can either just use the hand raise feature or just turn on your video and we'll have that discussion. All right, any comments on this slide? Yes, Mr. Shorsky.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just interested in hearing from the company and other participants as appropriate regarding kind of the definition of open VPP market. And there's a comment, outcome driven, not technology driven, and streamlined enrollment and open market for VPP aggregators. You know, I think that can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different folks. And I'm just curious, first of all, the company's perspective, and then the perspective of perhaps other market participants here in terms of how customer acquisition would be managed and how the you know, dispatch and grid integration would be managed, particularly for storage related assets in an open context. We've observed in California, you know, and as a lot of places, of course, there's lots and lots of solar plus storage vendors, as well as you name it, you know, smart water heaters, smart thermostats, and so on, doing multiple aggregations in a given territory with sometimes problematic results from a number of different perspectives. I'm just curious, kind of what is the market structure that the company has in mind and that the commission has in mind as maybe something that folks are pointing toward, or is this just more of an experimental period?
Well, Ms. Pollack, you want to jump in first?
Sure, happy to respond to that. Thanks for the question. I think there's a couple different ways to answer this. I think from a market perspective, I really view that as the participation model. And I think what we're trying to achieve here is make it so that vendors and aggregators that have DER assets are able to, within the constructs and objectives of this pilot, are able to participate and not restricted from doing that. From a technical perspective, you know, these assets will be subject to the same types of interconnection agreements and types of analysis to ensure that we're not creating unintended detrimental impacts on our system from the use and dispatch of them. So, you know, beyond that, I think it's hard to say definitively what this is going to look like, but I think the idea here is that any vendor that is able to achieve the objective of the commission's order in this proceeding can freely participate and be integrated into the platform that we'd be using to achieve those objectives. I will say, you know, we're not in a liquid market like California or New York or other wholesale markets. So ultimately, I think at the end of the day, that the sort of price incentives that are available to third parties and aggregators will probably be driven a bit more programmatically, at least initially. So that's one thing we'll have to reconcile as well. But really, I think it comes down to open participation.
Great.
That's
Thank
very
you. And
helpful.
I
Thank you.
will, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Mr. Shoshi.
Just to follow up, with respect to Mr. Pollock, your discussion about the DERMS strategy for the company, it sounds like the various VPP platforms, if that's the right word, in the open market would then be coordinated and controlled by the Excel DERMS. Is that right? Or is there more of a direct sort of market integration somehow?
I think generally that's correct. I would call them really more aggregators than VPP platforms. So yeah, we would be issuing sort of the dispatch signals, assuming we go to more of a pay-per-performance type VPP construct. But that's correct. They'd be interfacing with our system to be able to do that, as well as enrollment and M&B and those other various supporting functions.
So I know these definitions are pretty, lots of gray zone in between VPPs and DERMS and DRMS systems and the like. But just to see if we can clarify it a little bit, based on what you just said, it sounds like, and your correction that, we're not looking at multiple VPP platforms per se, but really perhaps multiple vendor managed or, stakeholder managed aggregations of specific DERs that they would control via a DERMS, and that the sort of the real VPP construct is in fact the Excel VPP, and it wouldn't really be accurate to say that there's multiple VPPs within Excel. I'm just curious how you deploy the vocabulary and the definitions with respect to what we're doing here. If it's different, anything you could say to clarify that would be helpful.
I don't know if Mr. Pollock wanted to answer that, but the way I'm seeing this is that you have a signal from the company that is transmitted to VPP aggregators that are operating throughout the system, that may have commercial, industrial, residential clients that are able to deliver the demand reduction or management that the company sends out through its through a signal, and that there would be an open market for participation from the VPP aggregators that would go through a process of enrollment, but that and I think this comes up later. Oh no, it's in here. The streamlined enrollment and open market for VPP aggregators is in this list. So that you would have an open market basically for participation from VPP aggregators, but that there would be a signal for an event that comes from the utility through a DERMS platform. And one of the discussions that we've had this morning is, that that could be, and Mr. Pollock can maybe help me to clarify this as well. But what I'm hearing is that DERMS platform could be something that is an off-the-shelf product that the company contracts to run through I don't know if it's a subscription or some sort of right to run that on site, or it could be a third-party DERMS that's managed separately, where there's a disconnection between the communication from the company to the DERMS platform, and then the DERMS platform to the VPP aggregators, and then coming back another communication back of delivered results, or it's going directly from the company DERMS to the VPP aggregators, and from the VPP aggregators back to the company DERMS. It seems like that's maybe the distinction, but Mr. Pollock, I don't know if that's an accurate representation.
I think that's the question. Apologies, I lost internet service there for a second. But yeah, in our experience, it's generally, from what we've seen with other utilities, more efficient to have that direct interface to the utility system rather than going through a third-party intermediary, especially given that we're not in a market construct today. Some of the benefits that I think we've heard from other commenters here really don't make a whole lot of sense, and would argue it's probably premature to look at that intermediate platform at this point in time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shorsky. Mr. Lane, did you have some comments or questions?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. The looking at the one bullet that talks about the outcome driven, not technology driven, a little bit of a follow up to what Richard was just saying. Our platform is exactly what the company is describing. We deploy our platform in a utilities data lab and work within the confines of their IT department, interacting with trading floors, AMI data, and things there. We actually provide that type of technology, and we are not typically a third party hosting it. So when I look at the technology piece, there's a lot of technology there, both in the way we interact with the third party suppliers like a Siemens, a Honeywell, Tesla, whoever. There's that part of the technology, and then there's the technology of integrating with the company's trading floor, their back office, AMI data. I think one of the people from the company mentioned HAN units. A lot of times we use those for direct telemetry. So I think there is definitely a technology piece, especially if we're looking at not being a third party, which is more of a VPP aggregator, and being a DERMS platform that resides within the utility. I think there's a huge technology component of that, because the scale up, you have to think in terms of millions of devices. Obviously during the pilot, it'll be small, but post pilot, it'll be very large. So what we found through our deployments, within utilities, our DERMS platform, is that, there's definitely some technology plays and things need to be considered for the scale up.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe I used the wrong verbiage here, but by outcome driven, not technology driven, what I was talking about there is not for example, battery program or an EV charging program, but basically what you're going to get is signals for a certain amount of reduction in demand. And that may come from a variety of different technologies, from an interface of different technologies together, from an open VPP market, as opposed to saying, we're going to go to these Tesla batteries and get this reduction. Does that make sense? I don't know if that was the wrong language to use there or not.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think you're spot on, because there's just so many DER types, and especially when you start interacting with battery suppliers versus building automation guys, like a Siemens or Honeywell, or a hot water or Rheem. I mean, there's just so many different technologies. And I think Zach pointed out also the communication standards, whether it's OpenADR or sometimes you even get into BACnet and Modbus and things that are a little older type technologies. But that's exactly right. I think the DERMS, residing within the utility, has to be open enough to run all that. Just comment on the OpenEE meter for the M&V side, that we use OpenEE meter ourselves. It's a very nice script. It works very well. I think, it has the ability, most DERMS have the ability to run multiple M&V processes. So sometimes if you cannot build an aggregated group of similar type facilities, you need options to go to other types of M&V processes. And certainly any DERMS that's built out, should be able to do that. That's
Great.
it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. And Mr. Pollock, I don't know if you had anything before I go to Ms. Best.
No, I was just going to add that I think our interpretation was exactly the same as how you described it. I think we'll probably see some natural shaping depending on the outcomes that the commission ultimately orders here in terms of which devices are probably best suited, but agree on leaving this technology neutral and really just trying to achieve the objectives of what the commission desires here.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Pollock. Ms. Best.
Yeah, I think thanks for the opportunity to participate. I think I just wanted to reiterate and confirm what Mark was saying and also what Mr. Pollock was saying about the focus, and what you, Commissioner Plant, were saying about the focus being on sending out the price signal for our ultimate objectives. And then there will be lots of different technologies that can be able to respond to that or provide those types of services. And it really comes down to both a coordination of technology where that's appropriate to optimize peak responses, et cetera, in addition to kind of not missing out on some of those long-term value propositions for basically base load VPP that could also be part of this solution. So I wanted to note that. And then my other note before Mr. Lane pointed that out, I just wanted to clarify that the OpenEE meter is an open source measurement and verification solution that is a pre-post analysis. It's been used alongside DERMS in a lot of different contexts to understand how devices and integrations of devices have been utilized. So just wanted to throw that one out there. And it can also be used as kind of a validation tool on DERMS. Sometimes they have a kind of a predefined value for a specific technology's performance as a forecast, and then the OpenEE meter can be used to validate that actually happened for the purposes of settlement or feedback loops that we were talking about. And I think that was all I was going to say. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. Best. I appreciate the comments and your participation, and the information that you provided on OpenEE meter was really valuable, I think, as well. Any other comments on this slide? Okay, we can move to the next one. So the second bullet and sort of our purpose was to set the main technical costs and time parameters for the RFP. This is specifically for the technical. I will note at this point, and I'll bring it up again later, my mistake. I included technical and time parameters for the RFP and meant to do another question that was the cost parameters, and I neglected to do that. So I would invite commenters in your final comments to address the cost parameters that might we might consider within the context of this recommendation to the commission. These are the parameters that I was able to sort of pull out of the comments that we received on this question, and I'll pause here for you to be able to look through this and see if there's any specific questions or additions or comments you have on this slide. Yes, Mr. Pollock.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Plant. Just a few clarifying questions on some of the bullets I see on the right side here. Optimization of the system, which I think is 3 down from the top. What did you have in mind with that one, as well as the 2 bullets below that?
Well, I'm gonna try and I'll try and remember because these were pulled out of the comments. These
Sure.
I think my understanding was that this was the ability to optimize the distribution system, basically, using the RFP. But let me see if I can find that question.
And no worries if you can't find it. I only ask because optimize can have a lot of connotations here.
Let me see if I can find it here. I'll just look real quick. Oh, this was actually under yours. You had listed the main technical parameters program management, device enrollment, constraint management, forecasting and availability to scheduling and dispatch optimization, notifications, measurement, verifications, and settlement. So if we want to
That's ringing a
clarify,
bell now. I wasn't sure if we were talking technology or distribution system here, but it sounds like the latter. So appreciate the additional context.
was that what you were? Is that what you were? Is that what you were referring to in these comments when you said
yeah, that's what
optimize?
we're referring to there. And again, as part of that sort of longer term roadmap, we think that's something that may not necessarily be a foundational requirement for this pilot, but that's something we want to strive to at a future point in time. When you get into optimizing the distribution system, that's really where some of that real-time visibility and control starts to matter more, as well as tie into those operational systems that we've talked about before.
Do you think there's? I understand that that's sort of an advanced application. Do you think there are opportunities within the pilot phase to design some sort of a smaller scale pilot that might be able to, sort of examine what those capabilities might be or identify?
I think that's possible. I sort of view optimization as kind of the real-time management, but something to the extent of a little bit softer language on maximizing use or managing the system more efficiently. I think we could certainly do something around that vein.
Okay, great. Mr. Shorsky, you have comments on this?
Yeah, I may be obtuse here, but for many of these, I have a question as to whether or not the ability or capability that's being requested would apply to the customer, the company operated VPP platform, if I can use that term, versus the vendor or third party operated DERMS, or both, or to be determined. So, I mean, really that question for me applies to many of these bullets. Forecasting would be an example, system optimization. I'm not quite sure what that means, but if it's, at the DER aggregation level of sort of subsidiary to the top node of the system, which presumably resides with the company, addressing operational constraints. I mean, there's almost every one of these. I'm going, okay, are we talking about the company's responsibility, Excel's responsibility in this, or the contractor? And also related to that is, it sounds like it's TBD as to whether or not the order would anticipate the company doing an RFP specifically for a new VPP software platform. And this, I guess, is a question for you, Mr. Pollack, as to what your sort of internal technology roadmap is calling for. Is that a determination that's yet to be made, or is implicit in this proceeding one way or another? I'm sorry, that's a couple different questions, multiple different questions.
Yeah. I'll send it over to Mr. Pollack. I think I can answer your first question.
Yeah.
So these are the parameters of the RFP. I don't see an RFP applying to the VPP aggregators because they're basically market participants. Once there's a system, a DERM system, that's able to send out a signal, there will be a process for VPP aggregators to enroll in that system, and then they would just take part. So we're not developing an RFP for VPPs specifically because they would be market participants. What we're talking about is sort of the RFP for that DERM system platform. What's the right words to use? I keep using platform, but I don't know if that's a right word or not. Anyway, the DERM system that would enable that communication out to the various different market participants as VPP aggregators. And Mr. Pollack, I don't know if you want to try and take a stab at the.
Sure, yeah, and I can add to your response there, Commissioner Plant, as well. I view these as, I think, requirements that we would have for the participants in order to be able to participate as part of the pilot. So being able to provide the data we need to do M&V, things like that. I'm just looking through the list here. Yeah, a lot of these are probably in the utilities court. As far as the technology roadmap, we're looking for an opportunity.
May I just ask it just to specific? I think this would be super helpful for everybody. Like ability to process customer enrollment applications. Would you be processing those enrollment applications? Would you be doing all the sort of customer relationship management in the proposed pilot, or is that something that could be flow downstream?
I think it depends, honestly. So, if we're starting from greenfield here, if a customer needs to apply for an interconnection application, that's going to be something the company takes care of. But as far as a DER provider actually aggregating a number of customers and presenting that to the company, that likely will be something that happens between the provider and the customers, and the company may just see at the end of that, an offering of 2 megawatts of batteries. I'd ask Mr. White, my colleague here, if he wants to add anything else here, as he's a little bit closer to the management and structuring of some of our programs today.
Yeah, good morning, Commissioner Plant and everyone. There are things we need to know about the customer and the location, even when working through an aggregator. Just as we talk about the optimization for distribution constraints and load balancing and those kinds of things. But I agree with Mr. Pollack that the customer relationship management can occur, through the aggregator.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. One question I had, so we're talking about, and these, again, this came, I think that specific recommendation came from COSA, and they may not have been thinking about this within the context of DERMS, but would a DERMS system have the capability of processing those those enrollment applications and verifying the customer, is a qualified customer, or would that be done separate from the DERMS? And then so one of the questions Mr. Shorsky was asking, is that done by the company or is that done by the DERMS? Which, if we're talking about a DERMS residing with the company, might be a sort of a I don't know, but would this be a part of the capabilities of a DERMS that would go into an RFP or no?
John, you want to take that one first?
Sure. Thanks, Zach. We do these things today, through existing systems and processes, through the acquisition of our DR portfolio. And so the company can do those things today. What a DERMS can do is make that more efficient and improve the tracking. We have a lot of manual processes today, and manual reporting and those kinds of things. A DERMS can create efficiencies as well as better tracking and capability to do that better.
Yeah. Okay. That was my understanding as well. So that makes sense.
And just to go down the list a little bit, what about forecasting? Is that something that happens at both levels, or just at the company level, or how do you see that?
I would anticipate that would be something that you would do at the company level through the DERMS to send out signals. Is that correct, Mr. Pollack?
I think that's how we envision it as well. Ultimately, it'll depend on the parameters of the program to understand what forecasting data we have available to us on asset availability and how the program is structured. But yeah, that capability to understand from at least a day-ahead perspective what types of DERs are available and their total capacity and where they're located is something that we feel is pretty important to have as part of that capability.
And clearly the load forecasting is something that would come from within the company as well. So if you anticipated in event, for example. Mr. Lane, did you have something to add there?
Oh yeah. That's I was going to comment on the same kind of thing. When we think about the RFP and following up on Sean's comment on location, when we install our DERMS within a utility, well, we specify what we need the VPP providers to provide to the DERMS on an asset by asset basis. Like, we have a very specific specification. One of those is longitude and latitude of the resource. along with other things that are specific to that type of resource. So I think calling out, to be able to generate optimization and forecasting and, control congestion, feeder level type control. Yeah, there's a lot of information the VPP providers are going to have to provide. And it'd be nice to have that document, during the RFP so that the VPP providers, there might be a lot of information they're not used to providing at DERMS. That's what we have found, that there's just not a lot of information they're used to providing. And it expands the communication that they're having to give the DERMS platform so that we can work within, the utilities data lake and generate forecasts and know exactly where the loads are. And for example, a bidirectional EV versus non-bidirectional, or a water heater's usage. When is it there? When does the homeowner actually at home and that water heater would be running? So anyway, as we think about a lot of this, as you look at all these optimizing and forecasting, communicating programs to the aggregators and participants, I think some thought needs to be put into, what does that communication look like and what type of information are we going to ask from the DERs and the VPP providers?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lang.
Just another clarifying question. So, Mark, you were using the term VPP providers, plural. What I was tracking on, and maybe this isn't right from Zach's earlier comment, is that the utility views a VPP platform as what it does, and what the vendors would do would be more akin to DERMS, individual DERMS or DER aggregations that would then roll up or be controlled by the VPP at the company level. So I just want to check whether I'm tracking that correctly. And also, Commissioner Plant, if it was your intention to direct the company to create a VPP platform or procure one that does what I'm describing. In other words, acts as the unifying sort of coordinator for a variety of aggregations that I thought we were now calling DER aggregations as opposed to subsidiary VPPs, if you will. I'm just trying to establish a consistent vocabulary in my own head because I'm getting, just for clarity for everybody.
Yeah, I know it can be confusing because people use different terms to refer to the same kind of things. What I'm thinking about as a VPP aggregator is what you're talking about maybe as a DER aggregator. Basically those, and it may be multiple technologies in a residence. It might be multiple technologies at a business or an industry, but basically something that is being fed into this. And I think I'm trying to remember the context you were using. I'm thinking of, when I say DERMS platform, that's really the mechanism through which the utility communicates to these variety of VPP aggregators or DER aggregators that are out there, on the system, that they can feed back through that DERMS platform, which is, the integration of the utility, communication from the utility, their need goes through the DERMS platform, that goes out to the VPP aggregators deliver that resource back to the company through the DERMS platform. And the M&B and all that sort of stuff happens within that system. So that's kind of the way I'm using the words. But I know that there's a lot of different terms for a lot of different things that mean a lot of different things to different people. So I apologize if I'm making it more confusing.
I think the structure is clear based on what you said. The use of the terms, I think, varies a little bit with what maybe with what Zach was saying earlier. Do you want to comment, Zach? I just want to see
Yeah, I think the terms may be a little bit different, but we're generally aligned there. So that, the company would be using a DRMS or a DERMS platform to define an objective, and we would push out a signal or receive communications from DER aggregators or DER providers that have assets sort of behind their control that would be able to meet that objective function. by interfacing with our
Yeah,
platform.
so Mr. Pollock's using DER aggregators. I've been using VPP aggregators. I think we're kind of talking about the same kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we tend to think of VPP as a use case that a platform can provide, but functionally, whether it's a DER aggregator or VPP, I think we're all talking the same objective here.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
Sure thing. And as far as your previous question, Mr. Shorsky, the roadmap where the company is right now, as I mentioned earlier, we were planning to issue an RFP in Q1, specifically dealing with some of the use cases that we'd identified through our previous renewable energy plan and distribution system plan. I do think there is strategic value here to the extent that the commission is open to the idea of potentially trying to align that RFP with some of the objectives that we're looking at on the screen here. So, the company would certainly be open to that. We can put some additional detail in our written comments on what that might look like, but I think there's value in trying to consolidate here.
Yeah, that'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, if there's no further questions or comments on this slide, we'll go to the next. So here's came down to timeframes. I think we heard from a variety of different commenters on timeframes. The gas DR, I think, was the one that, obviously we're constrained by a heating season. So the idea was that we would be able to get something up and operational by September 24. That would be leading into that 24-25 heating season. And that would be the objective of an RFP. I think it was mentioned in the comments that could just simply be a component of the RFP that a respondent to the RFP would be able to commit to trying to getting the system up by that time. Similar time frame for a VPP pilot, although I did bump it. I think that we heard from commenters, maybe that August or September for the VPP pilot. I'm hoping that we might be able to bump that back to July just so that we could get into that August season when we do see, events, I would imagine, coming from the company. But if there's I don't know if you had any comments on that time frame there, Mr. Pollock or Mr. Manchel.
I've maybe more than one company representative will provide some feedback here, but I guess my 2 cents on the issuance date when this first goes out, we should just be aware that the company is going to need some reasonable time to digest what we expect might be a fairly complicated list of instructions for creation of an RFP that we just can't pull off the shelf. And so expectations that we'll just get a final decision and turn that into a fully fleshed out and thorough RFP that meets expectations in just a matter of a couple of weeks may be fairly challenging, especially when you factor in existing labor and a busy January month and the holidays. So not trying to, influence the commission's expectations here, but just some reality to the fact that we'll need some reasonable time to put this all together, which might be a little complicated.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And again, one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning is that, I think what we heard was that a DERMS platform could potentially accommodate both gas DR and VPP, but that perhaps it may be more beneficial for the company since it's a much more specific application through gas DR to do that as a separate RFP that's maybe not as intricate as a DERMS RFP. I think that RFP perhaps would be less complicated, but and that's the one that really there's the time constraint for the heating season on. But I hear your concerns, and I share them as well. we're all a little bit overwhelmed by the schedule over the next couple of months. So, any other comments on this?
I would just add to Mr. Manshold's comments here that schedule, at least to us, is pretty aggressive. If we're going out to RFP for a DRMS or a DERMS platform to be able to communicate with those DER aggregators, that process itself will take at least 1 to 2 months, and then we actually have to do the actual IT work to go integrate it with our systems. So I think there are ways to move forward faster that many of the commenters had mentioned in their comments. But I think that kind of gets us back to the environment where we are today, where we've got a lot of vendors sort of operating independently of one another, multiple different types of software that are all kind of doing their own thing and not having that unified view, which I think prohibits us from that longer term scalability and opportunity.
Understand. Mr. Lane.
Yeah, Zach may have just answered my question a little bit, but one of the questions I had was following up on Richard said with the terminology, is the pilot we're talking about actually a DERMS platform pilot within the company, or are we thinking a combination like bring a group of VPP aggregators, or you may call them DER aggregators, bringing an aggregation to the company, or is it a combination of the two? I'm just a little with all the different terms. I'm getting a little confused on really, is the pilot for the DERMS within Excel, or is the pilot for aggregators to bring DERs to Excel? Thanks.
So my take on it is that it's a little bit of both. I think the ultimate pilot is the ability to deliver the value of a VPP basically to the Excel system. The mechanism for doing that is through a DERMS platform and the DER VPP aggregators on the other end. But ultimately, what we're wanting to pilot in this case is the effective aggregation of demand management to be able to deliver value to the system and to the customers. So that's really the focus of the pilot as it relates to that. The other that we have is the gas DR pilot. The gas DR pilot, again, I was saying we've heard in the comments that maybe this could be done under the DERMS platform. Maybe it's done separately. Maybe it's done separately for the pilot perspective and then can be integrated under a DERMS platform later. I'm not sure what the technical requirements of that are. I also don't know exactly how that would work from a business standpoint within Excel, since they're separate companies. The gas company and the electric company are separate, and so I'm not sure how the cost allocation and various different things would work in that case. So it's a little bit more complicated, their integration. But the gas DR pilot is specifically to try and address any constrained systems within the gas distribution system where we can avoid capital investments and expansion of capacity within the gas distribution system through the use of more advanced gas DR technologies. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. It sounds a little more holistic of looking at, potentially the DERMS within Excel along with then the DERs on the bottom end. So it could be a kind of a joint venture between multiple VPP providers along with a DERMS provider to achieve really ultimately the goal of, what you described.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's it for me.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lane. Appreciate it. Okay. Any other comments on this slide? We'll go to the next. So the milestones for the RFP. These were again pulled out of the comments that we received. from the participants. I'll allow you to kind of run through this, and if there's any other comments. Okay, if no comments on this. Also, I just want to emphasize again, we welcome any follow-up comments and final comments that you want to submit to any of these slides or issues or anything that you hear here. So move on to the next slide. Operational and reporting milestones for the pilots. These are again taken from the comments. We'll pause here. Yes, Mr. Pollack.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Plant. Similar to the theme on the other slide, I think there's potentially a mix of utility actions or requirements here and DR provider or VPP provider actions here. So we can, point this out in our final comments, but just clarifying role here. As far as the second bullet on enabling hardware and equipment, generally the way the company is looking at this is this should be a pretty hardware light pilot. Really depending on the capabilities that exist in hardware and devices today, like smart inverters, rather than deploying additional hardware to achieve the same means here.
Yeah, I think that specific one came from Copper Labs and had to do with their equipment that's specific to their application.
That would make sense then. Appreciate the clarification.
That was gas DR. Okay. We'll move on to the next slide. So measurement and verification, as we've discussed, the OpenEE meter is the example that we heard multiple times. We also heard, more generally around energy benefits, capacity benefits, non-energy benefits, costs. And then we heard from, I believe it was Sweep, that monitoring and reporting on a regular basis it would be helpful both, to the utility, but also to various different stakeholders. I think Sweep suggested the quarterly DSM roundtable as being an opportunity for quarterly updates on the process for the pilot. Okay, and go to the next slide. So these are the technical and data requirements that we heard. We've got it broken out here from the gas DR as well as the VPP. Again, this came from the comments. I'll pause here, allow you to take a look through all this, and if there's any other comments. I know that Mr. Pollack had mentioned some of these things in his comments as well.
Just a clarifying question, if I might, regarding the question of the demonstrated intention and process to scale following the pilot. Is that your intention, Commissioner Plant, as well as to direct the company to define the post-pilot scale-up process, or is that subject to another proceeding, or what's the plan on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would probably need. I'm not sure if we need another proceeding, or if that could be addressed through the commissioner's information meeting that we had in the reporting and performance component. But what I was putting this here was kind of what we were talking about at the beginning around an intention, communicated intention that following the successful deployment of a pilot, it's the intention of the company to turn this into a much more full scale, beyond the pilot phase, and understanding that there's things that we'll learn through the process, but that ultimately our objective is to take what we learn in the pilot and turn that into a scaled, full scale deployment of a VPP system.
So it would likely be subject then to if the company provided a framework for that, it would be subject to further comment and direction from the commission. Is that what I heard? As I understand it, that's correct. I don't know if that would happen, what form, if that would be in a separate docket, if it would be a part of a different docket. A lot of that may depend on where we are in the process, and what dockets are currently underway at the time. But I think there would certainly need to be a plan for full scale deployment, and also questions around cost recovery and various different things that would need to be addressed by the through a litigated proceeding. Whether it's a separate proceeding or not, I'm not sure. Thank you.
Before I go to Mr. Altos, Mr. White, did you have some comments on that, or?
Thank you, Commissioner Plant. I'm taking in, the requirements kind of in whole, and with regard to the timeline. Some of these items are a bigger lift than others, and so I'm concerned if the expectation is to hit all of the requirements within the pilot period, and whether there can be some phasing, if the commission would be open to us laying out the prioritization within the end of 2024 timeline, versus things that may take longer. Technology implementation, for instance, is something that generally takes longer than a year, even if we have cost recovery established, use cases established, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, Mr. White. I think that probably from the commenters' perspectives, what we're asking here is what's the expectation from the utility in terms of from the people who are going to be providing these various different services, and my expectation is that they were thinking in a full deployed VPP environment. These are the various different things that would be required. I very much welcome the comments from the company on which ones of these components may be more of a full-scale deployment versus what would be necessary for a pilot. I don't think that distinction was really made clear in my question. I was just sort of asking the participants what what kind of information they would need from the utility.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank
We'll
you.
include those.
Mr. Althoff.
Hello. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks, Commissioner Plant. I have a little confusion about some jargon, the word customer. When one of the interests in VPPs is we have a new participant in the industry. We have the prosumer who makes an investment outside of the rate base that creates value to ratepayers. So in this, we keep using the word participant to refer to VPP aggregators. Aren't the prosumers the ones who make the investment that are the actual participants? And the VPP aggregators are more of a broker between the investor and the utility. So this is a whole new class of participants. Yeah. And so when we're talking about incentive structure, our interest, our cooperative model is, how does a prosumer determine the return on an investment? What's the compensation going to be? What's the value stack? Or do we need to design the prosumer's system to capture ancillary services, capacity, reserves, way beyond the kilowatt hour? And so I guess what I'm here to plead for is some kind of prosumer protection. We've had consumer protection in the old system, and now we have someone willing to make an investment at lower rates to all, who is really on the short end of the stick here. The one who makes the investment should be front and center on these incentive structure conversations. So, I guess I would plead to change customer and participants to prosumer. So we understand these are previously customers who were buyers of products from the utilities, and now they become producers of products that the utility can utilize to benefit all ratepayers. And so, just want to see the prosumer word, but thank you. This is the interest of VPP nationally, is this new participant, entirely new class. So thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that. And thank you for the distinction there. And agree with your comments. Other comments on the utility data requirements? We'll move to the next slide. Okay, I guess that was it. So, we're targeting, as I mentioned, a recommended decision to the commission by the end of December. And in that light, we welcome final comments on the proceeding by November 30th. Again, any final thoughts or things that you would like to have considered within the recommended decision, or any comments on any of the slides that we shared today. As I mentioned before, I neglected to include a question on the main cost parameters for the RFPs. I think in the actual order, it said technical cost and time parameters, and I did technical and time and failed to include cost. So would please make a request that you maybe address the cost parameters in your submissions, so that we can have that considered within the recommended decision in your final comments. And Mr. Mansholt, did you have a?
I may have missed it, but will this presentation be submitted in the docket or made available some other fashion?
This whole video is obviously on our YouTube page. Okay. And I can submit this presentation that we've gone through to the e-filing systems, I believe. So it can be. If you prefer us to use the YouTube option, that's fine too. That's a helpful reminder. Ms. Dundas is going to tell me what I can do and what I can't do.
I think it's upload the files
into the docket. So that will happen eventually.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. So with this, the presentation will be a part of the docket officially. And finally, I want to thank everybody for your participation. This has been an incredible learning experience, but also really a great opportunity to hear about what various different companies are doing, how they're integrating their products into efforts around the country and around the world. We've had participation from internationally from companies that are doing this all over the world. So I really appreciate your participation. I want to also mention that our one of our researchers, Nicholas Foss, has done some really great work in pulling together information from a variety of various different reports, many of which were referenced within this proceeding, and put it into a VPP report that is a part of this docket as well, which you're welcome to read. That's that he did wonderful work on in sort of framing up the various different issues, and we would encourage you to take a look at that and give us feedback on that as well. And also a big thank you to Ms. Dundas again for giving us our legal guidance, and also to Commissioner Gilman for really getting this kicked off in a great way. So with that, again, final comments by November 30th, and with that, the hearing is adjourned, or the workshop is adjourned. Sorry. Thanks.